Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me, whether you're listening over podcast or watching me here on YouTube. Today, we're going to talk about forgiving the parts of ourselves that allowed someone to harm us. So, raise your hand if forgiving yourself is harder than forgiving other people. Raise your hand if you often offer more grace and compassion to others than you do for yourself. Have you ever said to yourself or asked yourself, why did I do that? Why did I allow that? I should have known better. I should never have allowed that to happen. So, first, we have to learn how to take any blame out of this, to take the blame off other people for hurting us and instead discover the parts of us that allowed that tolerated that in the first place, and then not blame ourselves for that. This forgiveness work can often be the most challenging of all. But here's the truth. I don't care how much you think you should have known better. The truth is you didn't. If you had, things would have gone differently. Okay. So I've learned a few reasons why we tolerate people that harm us. Sometimes we tolerate things because we have a low self-opinion of ourselves. We have low self-esteem. We don't believe we are worthy. We will accept treatment from others to prove our worthlessness. If we don't believe we deserve better, we will tolerate being treated poorly by others. So we have to forgive ourselves for not knowing any better, for not knowing how to love ourselves, for not seeing our own worth, for not believing we were worthy of something better, for not being taught that we were worthy. Okay. And sometimes we tolerate certain behaviors and treatment from others because we have hope, because we care, because we believe things will get better. And maybe they do sometimes, but just remember when we're in this place, we don't make decisions from this place that we think are going to harm us. We're making these decisions because we think something good is going to come from it. So just remember that and have forgiveness and compassion and grace and love for the person that you are. Sometimes we tolerate things because we don't have boundaries. One of my personal examples, when I let my ex moved back into our home after getting out of rehab, I did not want to do that. But I thought it was the right thing to do, quote unquote, right thing. Like that's what a good Christian wife does, right? And of course, I loved and cared about him, but I was not ready for that. I did not want that to happen, but I didn't trust my own self. I didn't trust my own instincts, my own gut, when I said yes, when I really wanted to say no. And I lived with that every day. It was a daily struggle. And that affected, that affects how we show up in relationships, doesn't it? I wasn't showing up in a way that was authentic to me. I was not my authentic self. And when you show up that way, you feel a certain way around people and you treat them a certain way. So it wasn't fair to me. It wasn't fair to him to say yes to something I wanted to say no to. I didn't honor my own values. I didn't honor my own boundaries. And I have to forgive myself for not doing so, for not listening to my own gut, my own truth, my own inner voice. But now I know. Now I know why that doesn't work. I've learned that lesson not to ignore that inner voice. And I know how it feels when I do so. So I didn't understand my own boundaries, but I do now. I know the difference between people pleasing, which is actually not kind because it's from obligation and guilt, versus service, which comes from love. You'll know you're serving, or people pleasing by how you feel, how you show up. People pleasing doesn't serve anybody. And I did what I thought was right at the time, but now I know the difference. And I won't be people pleasing and making decisions that don't serve me or others anymore into the future. So look, when stuff like this happens, we only hurt ourselves when we don't forgive ourselves. We have to forgive the parts of us that didn't understand, that hadn't healed yet, that tolerated certain things because we didn't know any better. For me, it was a combination of thinking, I didn't deserve any better, because I had, feelings of guilt about some things that had happened in my past. And, you know, there were also parts of me that just were uneducated. I didn't know, things like, if you've listened to my trauma story a few episodes ago, I didn't know what trauma bonds were. I had to go to therapy and get educated about that kind of stuff. And I had to learn what my boundaries were. I had to learn why I didn't uphold my values, why I said yes to things I really wanted to say no to, because I didn't know. I thought I was doing the right thing, or the quote unquote kind thing, or the thing I was supposed to do. So we've got to forgive not just them, right? And we can find gratitude for the ones who showed up in our lives and helped us find those parts of us that needed that healing, that needed that education, right? We can be grateful for those lessons, and we can be grateful to have found again those parts of us that needed that healing, those parts of us that tolerated certain things so that we could heal them, so that we don't tolerate the same things in the future. And that's good to know, right? So whether you learned from something to value yourself, because of that experience, you now know your worth and you value yourself, which is a huge and beautiful and wonderful lesson. Or maybe you learned, just what you do and don't want to tolerate. Maybe you learned what your boundaries were. All of these are lessons worth learning. And we've got to learn these things through mishaps and mistakes. Most of these things we're not taught. We can't just be told, hey, don't do some things maybe, but we can't just be told, hey, don't do that. Watch out for this and that. Most of the things that we learn in life, we have to learn through these life lessons. Because the truth is, none of us are promised a life, free of harm. We harm people, and people harm us. We don't go through life thinking it's supposed to be perfect, that they or we aren't supposed to make mistakes. Remember, that's literally what life is. That is life. It's what we do with these lessons that matters. It's how we learn and how we grow from the experiences. It's how we learn to not let them break us or tear us down or cause us to give up. Whichever reason, whether you were hating on yourself or just trying to see the good in someone else, or you just didn't know what your boundaries were yet, just the fact that you're maybe listening to this and questioning it now, that shows that you're growing. If you're looking back and you're realizing like, oh, that's not what I want for my future, that is growth, that is progress. So look, it's not so much that we did things or had these things happen to us. It's not so much that, sometimes we ignore that inner voice, or that we believed we weren't worthy, or that we had hope and it just didn't pan out, or we didn't know what our boundaries were. Really, the suffering happens after the fact, when we continue to tell ourselves we should have known better. That's what we have to stop doing. We torture ourselves with this narrative in our minds. We've got to forgive and stop with that narrative and that story that we keep telling ourselves. We've got to focus instead on repairing that relationship with ourselves. We want to get to, I forgive you, I love you, thanks for the lesson. For them, yes, but mainly for us. And it's so much easier to do that. It's so much easier to get to, I forgive you, I love you, thanks for the lesson, when we stop arguing or telling ourselves that we should have known better. All right? Okay, till next time. See ya.